What is DNA fingerprinting or DNA profiling? Leicester University geneticist Alec Jeffreys developed a technique called DNA fingerprinting in 1985. It allows DNA samples from different people to be compared to look for similarities and differences. It's used for solving crimes and can also confirm if people are related to each other, like in paternity testing. Any two people in the world have 99.9% of their DNA the same, so this process analyzes the differences in the remaining 0.1%. This modern technology is called DNA profiling. It's a very sensitive technique which only needs a few skin cells, a hair root, or a tiny amount of blood or saliva.
There are sections, or loci, of chromosomes, where instead of a gene consisting of a long sequence of bases, there are much shorter sequences of 3, 4, or 5 bases that are repeated many times. For example,
these repeated sequences are called short tandem repeats, or STR.
At these places on the chromosomes where we find these STRs, there are areas that vary in number of repeats. DNA profiling only looks at these STRs.
A cell sample is collected. This could be from some blood at a crime scene, or a swab from the inside of someone's cheek, for example. The DNA is then extracted from the sample. Many copies of this DNA may be made using the polymerase chain reaction, or PCR. Special enzymes called restriction endonucleases are used to cut the DNA up into different size pieces. The DNA samples are then put into wells in a special gel called agarose for the process of gel electrophoresis, which separates the DNA fragments by size. The pattern is then transferred to a nylon sheet in southern blotting. And finally, the lines produced by the DNA samples from different people are compared. So let's have a go at using DNA profiles to solve some mysteries. An item was stolen in a burglary. A drop of blood was left behind by the thief. Samples of DNA were taken from 4 suspects and compared to the sample left at the crime scene. Which suspect is guilty? Here's a clue. Look for the one that is most similar to the one from the crime scene. Pause the video while you decide. Suspect 3 is guilty. Can you see how the pattern of bands matches in Suspect 3 and the crime scene? Their DNA is the same. Let's try another. A soldier has been killed in an explosion and has lost his dog tags that identify him. 3 soldiers are missing from their unit, so the army asks the 3 sets of parents for a DNA sample so that they might compare it to the soldier's DNA and therefore make an identification. Remember, the soldier will only share half of his DNA with each parent. So which set of parents is the soldier the son of? Pause the video while you decide. Parents C and D. As you can see, he inherited the first band from parent D and the second, third and fourth from parent C, and so on. So now you understand how DNA profiles or fingerprints are made and seen some examples of where they can be used. You can even interpret a DNA profile.
The answer question 1. Development of important scientific discovery. Alec Jeffreys argued that lasers, nuclear magnetic resonance, semiconductors, nanostructures all originated from basic physical research. This was summed up by Albert Einstein in his famous quote that I have no special talent, I am only passionately curious. Push factor. Undirected research brings about curiosity and acts as a catalyst for researchers to do more. It explores the nature and place within it and leads to practical benefit to the society that can be commercialized. For credit and financial benefit for research-funded institutes, such as case of Alec Jeffreys, even though he discovered or developed DNA fingerprinting, listed institute who funded the research took the large profit from the discovery of genetic fingerprinting. Leverage for development of new technology product. The route from discovery to practical application usually takes long. For example, it took 13 years from laboratory to marketplace developed Viagra, and it was almost aborted as a result dwindling possible role by its funding institution. So basic research can help in creating enabling platforms, ideas and discoveries to spring with new technology and products. Disruptive innovation. It encourages scientists and researchers to focus more on the concept of the research itself without having to worry about the market or communication of their discoveries. For question 2, we think that research should be linked to businesses and products. The words of Sir Alex in 1984, I have never approached an experiment with a desire to solve a practical problem, is a clear indication of undirected research, which negates the primary purpose for research development by funding institutions and sponsors like listed. Since firms have short time period with a competition around the clock and shareholders waiting for return on their investments, it becomes difficult for firms to invest in research which takes a very long time with dwindling role and uncertain or virtual market. But if linked with product and business, it will provide firms with invention ideas and innovate into a new product and business with prediction of profitable market directions and time frames. Also, in order to become a leader in an industry, firms have to link their research to product business while at the same time keep aside a little portion of their research for curiosity-driven research.
Question 3. Show how this case illustrates the power and influence of radical innovation and incremental innovation. The answer is, this case illustrates the influence of radical innovation in the area of criminal prosecution. Before DNA analysis was found, most jurors relied on the presence of hard evidence such as fingerprints to convict a criminal. Fingerprints have several limitations which can lead to wrong judgment of suspect by the juror. The presence of DNA analysis allows high accuracy and a wide range of sources for criminals' evidence. Not to mention the increasing number of DNA databases available in UK, since DNA can be taken basically from hair strand to sweat. This makes a radical change on the how policy works on the crime scene and how the criminal prosecution can rely on many evidence. At the same time, this case also shows incremental innovation in terms of the update capabilities and fine-tune of DNA analysis technologies. From at first, it can take months, but thanks to incremental innovation, the same analysis can be done in a matter of days or weeks if needed. Question 4. Given the contribution to society that DNA fingerprinting has made, why is Alex Jeffrey not a household name? The answer is, although Alex Jeffrey discovered the technology behind fingerprinting under his employer and funding institution, Lister Institute, as a research fellow, both were unable to make financial gain or fame. However, a chemical company, ICI, bought the patent from Lister Institute and formed a company called Selma Diagnostic to commercially exploit the technology, and it earned name, fame, and was extremely successful and profitable over the next 20 years. This clearly shows that scientific discovery itself rarely produces fame nor fortune. It is the application of this science that usually lead to fortune and to a lesser extent fame.
When looking back at the past in 1930 after the Second World War, forensic science was quickly recognized and valued by both police and the general public. Fortunately, DNA profiling happens to be the most significant development in forensic science and was pioneered by the Forensic Science Service. Its ability in tackling cases of emotional concern and wreckage contributed immensely to the speedy adoption of the technology. In fact, DNA has evolved into one of forensic science's most powerful tools, aiding in the identification of suspects and victims, the conviction of the guilty, and the exoneration of the innocent. That means strides in forensic science can not only help catch criminals but assist in creating a fairer and more efficient criminal justice system. These include a case of murder and rape two young girls by Colin Pitchfork. He was the first person convicted of rape and murder using DNA profiling after he murdered the two young girls in Enderby area of Leicestershire. A case murder of a 16-year-old Claire Aram by Paul Hutchinson. Hutchinson, who had no previous criminal convictions, was caught after his 19-year-old son was detained on a reckless driving charge in June 2008. A DNA swab taken of his son provided a familiar match to the profile of the probable killer of Claire Aram back in 1983. An immigration case identifying the biological relationship of Christiana Sarba and her son, Andrew, in 1985, where it was necessary to compare Christiana's DNA sample against that of Andrew's and his three legally recognized siblings, where a direct biological relationship was shown beyond a doubt. The extraordinary growth of the DNA fingerprinting business was catalyzed by the mass appeal of CSI television shows. This invariably led to $20 billion intercircular industry within a few years. Also, they have raised the importance of forensic evidence in the eyes of the public. The forensic use of DNA involves the public in a number of roles. The rapid adoption of DNA identification as part of the legal system and continuing developments have afforded little opportunity to thoroughly interrogate public understanding of issues. Bring science to a mass audience and encourage interest in science among the populace. Namely, it will indicate that there is a desire from public to know more about forensic science, the importance of research and its application to their life. Public understanding of DNA is limited to applied science, which can help the public solve problems. This somehow will limit the abilities of research, which we believe can achieve greater application rather than one specific issue at a time. The cutting-edge technology used in collecting and analyzing DNA evidence as a major forensic toolkit for solving crimes on TV increased public awareness to the point that many jurors in real-world courtrooms expect to see DNA evidence even when a case does not warrant it. They claim that watching television programs like CSI has caused jurors to wrongfully acquit guilty defendants when no scientific evidence has been presented. The mass media quickly picked up on this complaint. This so-called effect was promptly dubbed the Csi Effect, laying much of the blame on the popular television series and its progeny.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Nuraini binti Johari, the last presenter who will present the last two questions given. Question 7. Discuss the impact of the CSI phenomenon. And the answer for question 7 is Hayes Smith and Levitt mentioned that the CSI impact and their phenomena has been a hotly discussed topic with varied results from numerous research, with some claiming that there is evidence of its influence on juror decisions and others claiming that prejudice may exist even if it has a minimal effect. The CSI effect was first described within the media as phenomena resulting from forensic and crime-based viewing television shows. The CSI phenomenon has enabled people all around the world to become more inclined toward the use of technology. Cutting-edge technology and spin-offs that widely exaggerate and glorify forensic science affect the general public and consequently impact trials, like burdening prosecutions by creating greater expectation of forensic science, and then is usually obtained burdening defenses by creating an exaggerated belief within the capability and reliability of forensic science, and a discount in conviction rates with little physical evidence, which is essentially thanks to CSI influence on juries. Furthermore, CSI approach misleads the general public about the time-consuming process by which civilians solve crimes, from tangible evidence to convicted criminals to creating unrealistic and quick public demands as a consequence of the police. However, even as every coin has two sides, the CSI phenomena did also. As a result of the CSI phenomena, people's interest in previously deemed scientifically inconsequential areas like DNA and fingerprints has grown. It also assisted youngsters in developing their interest in science, allowing many of us to become curious about and pursue a career in forensic science.
Question 8, which is the last question. Explain the prosecutor's fallacy and why it is a problem.
And the answer is the prosecutor fallacy was to misapply Bayes' theorem in the courtroom. Instead of asking the likelihood of a defendant's innocence by providing all the evidence, the prosecutor, judge, and jury made the mistake of asking the likelihood of evidence if the defendant is innocent. Indeed, while forensic wisdom has vastly backed in the resolution of crimes, the premises on which jurors base their conclusions of miscalculation appear to be hugely incorrect, and hence should not be regarded a reliable and absolute system of evidence of the conviction. We suppose that forensic substantiation solves a crime, that the liability of condemning culprits using forensic wisdom is around 1 in a billion, and that the probability of forensic wisdom failing to discover culprits who commits crime in 1 in a billion. In other words, there is a certain 0.01% probability that the suspect did not commit against the law, despite the very fact that this proportion is endless and negligible. The jury reverses the probability of an incident supported statistical standards. It is a severe matter that, if not thoroughly examined, can transform innocent individuals into criminals.